And all praises, honor, and glory to our power, Yahweh. Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rachakodash. Double honors to the apostles, the bishops, and the elders, a great millstone. Peace and blessings to the hopeful elect of the tabernacles of David, scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, and wherever you may be. And wherever you may be, to you I say, Shalom, Nashurala, Shalom. Alright, we're going to get into, can't really say Genesis, the 49th chapter, but we are going to get into one last tribe before we summarize this whole chapter here, and that's going to be the tribe of Manasseh, since it wasn't really talked about much. And I just want to also include that because we're talking about all the tribes. Now, Genesis the 49th chapter was we went through straightforward, but like I said, Manasseh is not really mentioned. We could go to Revelation chapter 7. You'll see Joseph, which is interchangeable with Ephraim, which are the so-called Puerto Ricans. So it's really talking about them, but you'll also see Manasseh there. Who you won't see is Dan. All right. We'll start here, just as usual. Israel's prophecy concerning his sons. And Lord, will you be edified by the lesson? Because we're going to get into a few things here. So it says, and Jacob called unto his sons and said, gather yourselves together, that I may tell you that which shall befall you in the last days. Gather yourselves together and hear, ye sons of Jacob, and hearken unto Israel your father. Okay, now we always go into this. The word for days is yawam. Okay, days, a lifetime, time period in general, day, time, year, so on and so forth. And the key word here is I clicked the wrong thing. All right, last with is acharyath. Okay, acharyath, meaning latter time, prophetic for future time, because these things were said to his 12 sons, referring to the children, all right, that will come from those 12 sons, all right, which trickles down to us today. Okay, so we're dealing with the tribe of Manasseh, and I'm gonna get a script actually. It's actually in the chapter that I'm gonna go to, but I want to put it up now. Okay. So Hebrews 11 and 21. By faith, Jacob, when he was a dying, blessed both the sons of Joseph, and worshipped, leaning upon the top of his staff. And blessing both the sons of Joseph, we're talking about Manasseh and Ephraim. Manasseh being the eldest, Ephraim being the youngest. Ephraim being the so-called Puerto Ricans, Manasseh being the so-called Cubans. All right, the Cubanos. Let's go to Genesis, the 46th chapter, and verse 19. Genesis 46:19. The sons of Rachel, Jacob's wife, Joseph and Benjamin. And unto Joseph in the land of Egypt were born Manasseh and Ephraim, all right, which Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, bare unto him. Okay, so Manasseh, in the Hebrew being Manasseh, meaning causing to forget. And in the chapter that we're going to go to, we'll find out why Manasseh was named Manasseh or Manasseh, which name means causing to forget. The eldest son of Joseph and progenitor of the tribe of Manasseh. All right, and the tribe descended from Manasseh, because Manasseh is the actual son, and then the tribal members that descend from that, the children. All right, so you get it. And it says the territory occupied by the tribe of Manasseh, which actually we could probably bring up here. Should be able to get it on a map. And then I'll tell you, this one always pops up. There you go. You had East Manasseh and you had West Manasseh. All right, because Joseph was blessed to get the double portion. So you have East Manasseh, West Manasseh, and you still have, you still have a land where Ephraim owned. Okay, as you see there in the center. All right, so going back. All right, so getting back to the scripture. Joseph, and unto Joseph in the land of Egypt were born Manasseh and Ephraim, which Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, bare unto him. Now we're going to jump over here to Genesis, the 41st chapter, and get a couple verses here. All right. Like I said, Lord, will this be edified? Because I really have to sit down and kind of go through to see what we can bring together to, showcase Manasseh here. So it says the sons of Joseph, Genesis 41 and 50. All right. And unto Joseph were born 2 sons before the years of famine came, which Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, bare unto him. Same thing, right? And Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for God said, He hath made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. All right. And the word for toil, it's trouble, a labor. Because mind you, when you go through Joseph's history, he was separated from his brothers. Okay. Saying that he was dead, he was torn by a wild beast. He ended up getting sold actually into captivity. I think it were some so-called Arabians. I can't remember the exact name of them right now, but yeah, and then they sold him to I want to say it was Potiphar. Well, somewhere with another, he reached Potiphar's household. Okay, because he was sold into slavery, and then it says in all my father's house, because as we just mentioned, he was separated from his family because of that. All right. 52, and the name of the second called he Ephraim. All right, the Puerto Ricans, which we've already gone through. For the highest hath caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction, which we got to get it since it's there. Has caused me to be fruitful. Parium. All right, it says I shall be doubly fruitful. Okay, because I think paria is fruit in the Hebrew. All right, paria. Okay, or parium, paria, or parium. All right, so parium, Ephraim. All right, so you follow me, and yeah, let's keep going. I didn't mean to get that. Let me back up here, and we're gonna jump over and get into the nitty gritty of Ephraim. All right, and then we'll get into a couple other things, and that'll be a wrap. So Genesis, the 48th chapter, and this is the scripture that we read in the opening. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed both the sons of Joseph and worshipped, leaning upon the top of his staff. So Genesis 48:1. We're going to read this whole chapter because you kind of have to. And it came to pass after these things that one told Joseph, behold, thy father is sick. And he took with him his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And one told Jacob and said, behold, thy son Joseph cometh unto thee. And Israel strengthened himself and sat upon the bed. And notice it says one told him this and one told him that, because mind you now, Joseph was second in all Egypt. The Lord rose him up to be second in all Egypt. Okay, so he had servants around him at any given time. All right, that's just natural for someone in that position of power to always have guards and servants. Okay, but anyways, it says, and Jacob said unto Joseph, God Almighty appeared unto me at Luz in the land of Canaan, and blessed me, and said unto me, behold, I will make thee fruitful and multiply thee, which is beautiful because well, it really doesn't have to do anything in particular, but I was making the point, which I was going to say, because Joseph's son is Ephraim, which means, well, one of his sons Ephraim, it means to be fruitful or doubly fruitful. But this is what Jacob said, and said unto me, behold, I will make thee fruitful and multiply thee. And he gave him 12 sons and a daughter. All right, and I will make of thee a multitude of people. And that was said to our other forefathers, which will be his father and his grandfather, that you will be as the sand of the sea, the dust of the earth, and the stars of heaven, for a multitude of number. All right. So, and I will give this land to thy seed after thee for an everlasting possession. To the Israelites, everlasting possession. And now thy 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, which were born unto thee in the land of Egypt before I came unto thee into Egypt, are mine. As Reuben and Simeon, they shall be mine. So this is here a key verse where he's taking Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, and saying that they're now part of these tribes. Okay. And thy issue, which thou begettest after them, shall be thine. and shall be called after the name of their brethren and their inheritance. And we can get the word for Ishmael here. Mawaladath. Alright, kindred, birth, offspring, relatives. Alright, so it's going to the descendants, the children. And as for me, when I come from Padan, Rachel died by me in the land of Canaan in the way, when yet there was but a little way to come unto Ephrath. And I buried her there in the way of Ephrath, the same is Bethlehem. And Israel beheld Joseph's sons, and said, Who are these? And Joseph said unto his father, They are my sons, whom the highest hath given me in this place. And he said, Bring them, I pray thee, unto me, and I will bless them. Now the eyes of Israel were dim for age, so that he could not see. And he brought them near unto him, and he kissed them, and embraced them. And Israel said unto Joseph, and because Jacob lived out his last days basically in Egypt, in particular in Goshen. Okay, and Israel said unto Joseph, I had not thought to see thy face, and lo, the Most High had shewed me also thy seed. Yeah, because as we talked about before, Joseph's history was that he was thought to be dead by his father. So that's why he said what he said. And then he says, not only am I seeing you again because you're alive, not now, he already, obviously at this point, he already, found out he was alive, but, not only do I get to see you again, but now you have grandchildren, right? Or children, his grandchildren, but you have children. And Joseph brought them out from between his knees, and he bowed himself with his face to the earth. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand, toward Israel's left hand. And you're going to have to use your imagination for this, all right? So Joseph is bound down before his father, and has his sons by the hand. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand toward Israel's left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand toward Israel's right hand, because they were facing him, and brought them near unto him. And Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it upon Ephraim's head, who was the younger. Okay, it says, and his left hand upon Manasseh's head, guiding his hands wittingly, for Manasseh was the firstborn, because he knew what he was doing, as we read below. Okay, to be prudent, be circumspect, wisely, understand, prosper. He could barely see, but the Spirit, had him know exactly what he was doing, what hand he was placing where. Okay, because notice it says his where he placed his left hand, which was upon Manasseh, and the right hand, all right, was upon Ephraim. And he blessed Joseph and said, the Most High, before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac did walk, the God which fed me all my life long unto this day, the angel which redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads, and let my name be named on them, and the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. So he's blessing them here. And when Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand upon the head of Ephraim, because mind you now, Joseph was bowed down before his father, so he probably looked up and realized his father had said the blessing, and then he tried to correct him. So check this out. And when Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand upon the head of Ephraim, it displeased him, and he held up his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head unto Manasseh's head. And Joseph really, he wasn't wrong, because him being an Israelite man and still remembering his culture and stuff, he probably understood the rights of the firstborn. All right, so that blessing was, in his eyes, the blessing was supposed to go to Manasseh because he is the firstborn son. Okay, but check this out. This is not what the Lord wanted. And Joseph said unto his father, Not so, my father, for this is the firstborn. Put thy right hand upon his head. Speaking about Manasseh. And his father refused and said, I know it, my son, I know it. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. But truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations. Because we mentioned, as we went through Ephraim, they have a lot of children, and we talked about how Esau pretty much decimated the Taino, but they still survived. They stayed alive and continue producing children, and still to this day they still produce a lot of children. And he blessed them that day, saying, In thee shall Israel bless, saying, The highest make thee as Ephraim, and as Manasseh. And he set Ephraim before Manasseh. All right, And Israel said unto Joseph, Behold, I die, but the Most High shall be with you, and bring you again unto the land of your fathers. Moreover, I have given, and it's beautiful because, as far as Joseph goes, he actually died, but he prophesied before he left. And he told them that when the Lord is going to visit you, all right, and bring you out of Egypt, and when you do, take my bones with you. So that actually goes along with what his father just said here. Bring you into the land of your fathers again. All right. So Joseph wasn't alive when it happened, but his bones were taken out of the land. Okay, so moreover, I have given to thee one portion above thy brethren, which I took out of the hand of the Amorite with my sword and with my bow. All right, so there you go, and this is showing you why Ephraim is mostly mentioned. Also, a portion of why Ephraim is interchangeable with Joseph. Okay, but also mentioning Manasseh, and he said what about Manasseh? He says, I know it, my son, I know it. But he also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. Okay? And I think we mentioned this. Let me pull up this real quick. Revelation chapter 7. Alright, verse 1. Well, I'm gonna have to read verse 1. Just get down here to the point. So it says, and I heard the number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. All right, and who you won't see is Dan, but we've already talked about that. Of the tribe of Judah were sealed 12,000, so-called Negroes. Of the tribe of Reuben were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Gad were sealed 12,000. All right, so-called Native American tribes, Seminoles and North American. All right, the tribe of Asher was sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Naphtali was sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Manasseh was sealed 12,000. Manasseh. Okay, because as we just read in Genesis the 48th chapter, he took them as part of the tribes. So they became part of the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay, and Dan is the one that we don't know about, because when you think about it, Joseph is really interchangeable with Ephraim. So Ephraim is automatically mentioned, and then you still have Levi, even though Levi didn't get an actual land allotment. Okay, he had the suburb cities. Levi is mentioned. So without Dan being mentioned, that's only 11. But that's where Manasseh comes in. And that's how you still get the 12. So the 12 tribes of Israel. So these are all the 12 tribes that are mentioned here in Revelation, the prophecy. Of the tribe of Simeon were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Levi were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Issachar was sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Zebulun was sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Joseph was sealed 12,000. And of the tribe of Benjamin were sealed 12,000. And Salaki, I was naming them off as I went, but I stopped there. But it's okay. We going through the videos, and so I pulled up a map already. Ancient Israel map. So instead of doing that, let me jump over here to the book of Joshua, chapter 17. Verse 7 says, and the coast of Manasseh was from Asher to Mikmathah, that lieth before Shechem, and the border went along on the right hand unto the inhabitants of it in Tappuah. Now Manasseh had the land of Tappuah, but Tappuah on the border of Manasseh belonged to the children of Ephraim. And the coast descended unto the river Kanah, southward of the river. These cities of Ephraim are among the cities of Manasseh. The coast of Manasseh also was on the north side of the river, and the outgoings of it were at the sea. Okay, and so as we mentioned, we already saw an ancient Israel map. I don't think we still have one up. No. But you can always pull up a map. I just wanted to read that because it's talking about those borders there. And once again, mind you, there was also an East Manasseh, okay, as well as West Manasseh, and then South, kind of central. You will see Ephraim there, all right. But we're more so centered around Manasseh, all right, which are the so-called Cubans, okay. Now we're going to actually get into a couple things here. Let me check my ticker, make sure we're still rolling. Okay, cool. Yep, still ticking. So I want to pull this up and get into a couple of things here. Yep. So I have both of these here. Man, I've had these for like 2 weeks now, maybe week and a half, 2 weeks. But I've been holding it because we haven't gotten to these tribes, just yet. I had to get through the other ones first. So we're just going to pull up a little bit of history of the Cuban people. So it says the history of the Cuban people is a complex narrative of indigenous survival, Spanish colonization, African influence through slavery, and it's not really talking about Africans. It says Africans, but of course, Google ain't gonna tell us exactly. But the African influence are not really Africans. It's the Israelites that came over here, or the Southern Kingdom in particular. But you get it. And it transformed the 20th century revolution. And also, speaking about these Cubans, they were also descending of those that were called Tainos, because we talked about the Tainos. All right, I believe in a couple of the tribes that we covered already. Definitely, obviously, Ephraim being one of them. But I believe it was also an Asher or one of those. I believe we mentioned in a couple tribes though. But these so-called Cubans were also part of those who were being. Oh, there's right here. I just looked down. Oh, let me just read. Okay, pre-Columbian and colonial eras. All right, pre-1492, 1898. Indigenous roots. Before European contact, Cuba was inhabited by the Guanajatabe, Siboney, and Taino peoples. There you go. The Taino, the most numerous, introduced agriculture and crops like yucca and tobacco. Spanish conquest. Christopher Columbus arrived in 1492 and colonization began in 1511. Which I believe we pulled that up. I think it was the 1511 rebellion. Within a century, the indigenous population was largely decimated by disease and forced labor under the encomienda system. Now notice, this is all history that we already talked about in previous tribes, because they all suffered the same thing, because these were the same Spaniards. Okay, so African influence to replace indigenous labor. Hundreds of thousands of enslaved Africans were brought to Cuba to work on sugar and coffee plantations. This created a deeply multicultural society with strong African roots in music, religion, and cuisine. And I believe we mentioned sugar was a major thing. It was very highly sought after, at one point. But the tip top thing was gold. All right, the struggle for independence, 1868 to 1902. Independence wars. Resistance against Spanish rule intensified in the late 19th century, led by figures like Carlos Manuel de Cespedes and national hero Jose Marti. U.S. intervention. Following the Spanish-American War in 1898, the U.S. occupied Cuba until 1902. Cuba gained formal independence but remained under significant U.S. influence through the Platt Amendment, which allowed U.S. intervention in Cuban affairs. We're not going to get down into all this here. You can just pull it up and yourself. We'll jump over here. All right, Cuban history is a rich blend of indigenous roots, Spanish colonization, and once again it says African influence, but is more so Israelites that were brought over here. But anyways, forming a unique culture shaped by Taino peoples, Spanish conquerors, and enslaved Africans. Those enslaved Africans weren't actually Africans. Those were the southern kingdom of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, so-called Negroes, West Indians, and Haitians. All right, and enslaved Israelites who came from Africa. All right, who came for the sugar and tobacco industries. Because that was sparking the transatlantic slave trade, where there were more things to be reaped from the lands, and they needed more workers, especially after killing so many of those that were already here, and but also they had some enslaved, so they needed more workers, so they went back east, brought goods from up north, from Europe and places like that, Spain or whatever. Brought the goods down to Africa, traded them for the slaves, brought the slaves across. Those slaves were Israelites, that is, and brought them across to the west, and had them reap these fields, okay, and pretty much put them into slavery, as we talked about with Reuben, because you had so-called Negroes, right, the tribe of Judah, who were fleeing from Georgia down south of Florida, meeting up with the Seminoles, okay. The so-called the so-called Seminoles being the Reubenites. All right, which I'm not going to talk too much about that, because you can just go back and listen to Ruben again, and pick up on that history, those Seminole Wars. All right. So indigenous peoples, the island was. Did we finish that? Actually, I don't think we did. After centuries of Spanish rule, Cuba gained independence in 1902, followed by a mix of U.S. influence and internal struggles, culminating in the 1959 revolution, which established a socialist state and led to significant immigration, particularly to the United States, creating vibrant Cuban communities in places like Miami. Yep, and that's where you hear probably mostly about them, even in TV shows and movies and stuff like that. So early inhabitants and Spanish conquest, pre-1492s to 1500s, indigenous peoples. The island was home to Guanahatabi, Siboney, and Taino peoples. Skilled farmers and fishers when Christopher Columbus arrived in 1492. Spanish colonization. Spain claimed Cuba, establishing settlements like Baracoa, 1511, and Havana in 1514. Demographic catastrophe. The native population was decimated by European diseases and brutal forced labor, encomienda system, and gold mines and plantations. Pretty much slave labor, all right? Forced slave labor, that is. And there you go, gold mines and plantations. All right, because there were also crops to be gathered that they would take back to Europe. Colonial era and African slavery. Once again, it's not talking about the Africans. These are the Israelites, 16th to 19th centuries. Sugar economy. See, we talked about sugar, right? The sugar and tobacco industries grew, requiring massive labor. There you go, see? Leading to intense importation of enslaved Israelites from Africa, from various ethnic groups. Bakonga, Yoruba, Arara. Cultural blending. African traditions fused with Spanish Catholicism, creating unique religions like Santeria and Palomonte. All right, British rule. The British briefly occupied Havana in 1762, boosting trade and sugar production. All right. I guess we can read the rest of this. Independence struggles and Republic, late 19th century to 1958. So wars for independence. Cuban nationalists fought Spain in the 10 Years' War. Yep. Actually have that. Cuban nationalists fought Spain in the 10 Years' War, 1868 to 1878, and Ludo War, 1879 to 1880, for freedom, ultimately abolishing slavery in 1880. Spanish-American War. Spain lost Cuba to the U.S. in 1898, with Cuba gaining formal independence as a republic in 1902. U.S. influence. The U.S. exerted significant economic and political control through the early 20th century. And you see where that's going there, so we don't really have to get into too far into that. What we're going to do, because I didn't expect that to be there, the Wars of Independence, 1868, 1902, the 10 Years of War, 1868 to 1878. All right, because it mentioned Carlos Manuel de Cespedes, I think it was he freed his slaves to fight the Spanish. All right, so that was pretty much how that began. Right, when Carlos freed his slaves to fight the Spanish, if I'm correct, that was the history there. Because I'm not sure if it'll turn up, but we do have something else that I want to get into. All right, speaking about the brutality. So the Taino genocide, and we could have easily brought this up when we talked about Ephraim. Okay. Bear with me. Alright. Mouth was getting dry. I had to get me water. Okay, so Taino genocide. So the Taino genocide was committed against the Taino indigenous people by the Spanish during their colonization of the Caribbean during the 16th century. The population of the Taino before the arrival of the Spanish Empire, on the island of Quisqueya or Haiti, which Haiti is where you get the name Haiti from, in 1492, which Christopher Columbus baptized Hispaniola. That's what the whole island is called. Oh, here it is right here. Present day Haiti and Dominican Republic. The whole island is called Hispaniola. It's estimated at between 10,000 and 1 million. Okay. The Spanish subjected them to slavery, massacres, and other violent treatment, after the last Taino chief was deposed in 1504. Yeah, and they would do a lot of atrocities to the people, to the chiefs. They would, sometimes rape their wives in front of them. They would sometimes take their homes. All right, go take the chief out the home, make him a slave, and take his home and live in it and stuff like that. All kinds of madness. By 1514, the population had reportedly been reduced to just 32,000 Taino. Okay, by 1514, the population had reportedly been reduced to just 32,000 Taino. By 1565, the number was reported at 200, and by 1802, they were declared extinct by the Spanish colonial authorities, because that's how many they killed. All right. I just looked down at that. Let me see here. Okay, yeah, it says, however, the descendants of the Taino continued to live, and their disappearance from records was part of a fictional story created by the Spanish Empire. Hold up, I read that wrong. Okay, yeah, however, descendants of the Taino continued to live, and their disappearance from records was part of a fictional story created by the Spanish Empire with the intention of erasing them from history. You can't tell me they ain't no devil. Alright? The story of them being completely wiped out, alright, was false and intentional to try to erase them from history. And is that, oh wow, hold on, I gotta get an extra verse here. I gotta get an extra verse here. Now that I'm on, real quick, I'm gonna throw this one in here, because you can't make this up right here. Psalms 3rd chapter, right? It says, we'll read from the top. Keep not thy silence, O power, hold not thy peace, and be not still, O power. For lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people, and consulted against thy hidden ones, which are us Israelites. They have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel shall be no more in remembrance. See? These are all the nations. Now, this wasn't all in this account that we're reading. Obviously, wasn't all the nations together trying to cut us off from our people. But it just makes me think about this verse, because that right there is that's history, man. That really happened. All right, where they completely decimated the numbers of the Taino, as we just read. They pretty much lied and said that they were pretty much cut off forever, wiped out from history, but they weren't. That was a lie. Just to wipe their existence from the records, okay? Because they knew we were Israelites. For they have consulted together with one consent, they are confederate against thee. Okay. But let me get back. Where was I? I think I was okay. Yeah. Let me pull this back up. So bam. And if you look at this picture, this is what we mentioned: burning them by the 13. See, hanging the people. Actually, I might have to get this off the screen. But yeah, they would hang them up by 13 feet, barely touching the ground, and set a fire underneath them and set them ablaze. And that's what they would say. I mean, that's what they would do. In the name of their form of Christianity, because of the 12 disciples and Jesus, right? And really, they were just devils. All right. And their whole intention was murder, rape, robbery, stealing and pillaging, and and gaining land and gold and things of that nature, right? Pretty much expanding their reach and their power. Okay, so here's more stuff, and I look into all of this. Looks like one of the like, not really forts, or I guess towns or whatever, being overrun and burned. There's another one, yeah, because I mentioned this because the houses would be mostly made out of straw, and what they would do is they would try. Oh, there was one account where they would they spoke peace to all the I think it was some tribal leaders and chiefs, and a bunch of other people. And when they got them in there, they locked them inside and burned the house down with them in there, because it was pretty much made of straw. And that seems like what one of these type of accounts is right here. This chick has a crown on her head, so she might have been like a chief's wife, maybe. I'm not sure, but yeah, because the homes were mostly made out of straw, so they would set them ablaze with everybody locked inside. Okay, and that's what be the last picture. Alright, so these are real accounts, man. Taino genocide. A 16th century illustration by Flemish Protestant Theodore de Bry and for Bartolomé de las Casas, Brevísima Religión de la Destrucción. I don't know what Brevísima means, but relation to the destruction. It says Brevísima Religión de la Destrucción de las Indias. So Brevisia, whatever that means, I don't know. Relation to the destruction of the Indies. Okay, that's what that says there. Relation to the destruction of the Indies, excuse me. But I don't know what Brevisima means. Not sure if I can bring up. Yeah, they don't really say what Brevisia means. Maybe you can figure it out. But I do know the rest of that. Relation to the destruction of the Indies. I think so. I know my Spanish is more rusty than a 14 an old vehicle, a Ford, with the crank motor. Depicting Spanish torture and murder of indigenous peoples during the conquest of Hispaniola. Alright, and these are all accounts. Let's check this out down here. Date 1493, 1550. Target the Taino, attack type genocide, mass murder, forced displacement, ethnic cleansing. Yep, you heard that word plenty of times before, right? Slavery. Look, starvation, collective punishment, like you see here in this picture up above, collective punishment, torture, genocidal rape, forced conversion to their version of Christianity, right? Supposedly, and then cultural genocide. So that's in there twice. Okay, and they didn't care if you were old, young, baby, men, women, even people that had infirmities. Okay, they did not care. But that is the Edomite nature. Okay, deaths 8,000 to 900,000. Between 80% and 90% of the Taino population died in the first 30 years. Perpetrators, Spanish Empire. Right? Maybe we'll get a little bit more of this. What's down here? Because this is a lot. I actually want to read some of this myself. Yeah, I definitely want to read some of this myself. I won't. Maybe we'll just read down to Hispaniola here. We won't read all of that. We'll just read maybe this portion here, and I'll wrap it up. Because you can just pull up the wiki yourself and read into it if you like. Especially if you're a reader. You might want to read. Or if you're just interested in getting some study in about some of this history here. So the Taino people were the descendants of the Arawak people who arrived in the Caribbean approximately 4,000 years before the conquest. 4,000 years before the conquest. And they lived in the Bahamas, the Greater Antilles, which I don't know if it was really that long. I'm not about to math all that right now. And they lived in the Bahamas, the Greater Antilles, and the Lesser Antilles. In 1492, Christopher Columbus was looking for a direct sea route connecting Europe to East Asia, hoping to open profitable ocean-going trade networks when he landed on the island of San Salvador. He originally thought he had arrived in the islands of the East Indies. When he realized that he had stumbled upon a previously unknown continent, he began to consider other potential sources of profit, focusing primarily on gold and slaves. See? An idiot, that pretty much fulfilled prophecy. Upon arriving on Hispaniola, a confrontation occurred between the crew of the Santa Maria and the Taino after the crew sexually abused Taino women. And you hear a lot about that. Although disease played a significant role in the decrease in the Taino population, violence and famine were also important factors. The tribute system was imposed to gain gold and other goods, yet came with devastating effects for the Taino population. The presence of the Spanish devastated crops and livestock, further worsening the conditions for the Tainos and the Spanish. The Spanish began to run low on supplies. To fulfill the need for food, they would negotiate with caciques, the chiefs basically, to provide food to the Spanish through a tribute system. Others found it easier to steal food from natives, thus worsening famine. Yet as conditions continued to worsen, caciques would refuse to pay tribute in protest. Spaniards would, because all these tribes that came in contact with these Spaniards or any of these Edomites were always friendly with them, treated them like brothers, man, but they were backstabbed. All right. Spaniards would intentionally capture caciques or caciques to gain more control and power over the Tainos. As tensions between the Taino and Spaniards grew, Tainos began to rebel against the Spanish more frequently, contributing to the Taino death toll. Alright. So yeah, a lot of history there. Oh wait, I gotta read this. We'll go back after this. When Columbus heard Carnabo, the cacique in Maguana, was planning an attack, he sent 400 men into their interior to attack and instill fear into the natives, further increasing tensions. In one instance, in early 1495, a sub-chief killed 10 people and set fire to huts with 6 Spaniards. In response, Cristobal Colon, his real name, Christopher Columbus, led an expedition resulting in the capture of over 1,500 Tainos that were to be sent to Spain to be sold, an unknown number of deaths. And you know, I want to read that because there were those of the Northern Kingdom that actually went into slave trade as well, that were taken back, or not back, well yeah, you could say back because they came from the east, that were taken back to the east, and they were servants over there. Okay, so that happened. So there was a trade of not only Southern Kingdom from Africa, but also the Northern Kingdom that were over here in the West were being taken into the slaves, you know, taken as slaves, and also some of them were taken as slaves back across the borders. Across the waters. Okay. Yep, it says capture over 1,500 Tainos that were to be sent to Spain to be sold, and an unknown number of deaths, resulting in the first open form of enslavement in Hispaniola. It says only 150 could fit on the ships, according to the Michel Cunel. I guess because it could be Michael. You know, people spelling names funny. I don't know. We'll call it MC. M. Cuneo, by Columbus's orders. Whoever wanted them could take as many as he pleased, resulting in over 600 being allotted to Spaniards. The remaining 400 were to be released, and around half the captives aboard the ship died. Okay, and there was an account that I read. I believe it was Judah. It was happening in Judah, where when you would have them working together, so they would bring slaves from the east, where they were kind of starting to outlaw the slave ships or whatever. So they would bring the slaves from the east, and then they would have a ship come from the west and raid that slave ship. Somehow in the raid, which is not like it was an accident, but somehow in the raid they would drop gold or whatever on the slave ship and steal the slaves, and then they'll take the slaves back to the west coast, and then the ship will leave with, you know, money or whatever, gold or whatever it was they were paying them. So ultimately they can say that, well, we never had slaves. Hey, that's a devil for you, man. Okay, he set it up where he could steal the slaves and pay, and then, you know, go back without having any flack, because they'll say, well, we didn't get the slaves. Oh, it's a demon, man. Okay, straight demon. And what the Lord's gonna deal with him, man. So yeah, that's all I'm gonna read there. There's a lot more history. I'm gonna jump over here. We pretty much. Let me grab this because we read this dealing with Ephraim. Excuse me. If we can get it again. Deuteronomy 33:17. His glory is like the firstling of his bullock, and his horns are like the horns of unicorns. With them he shall push the people together to the ends of the earth. And they are the 10,000s of Ephraim, so-called Puerto Ricans, and they are the thousands of Manasseh, so-called Cubans. Okay, and this is them standing up in these latter days, playing a part in the ministry. Letting their light shine before the world. The gospel is going out so that the elect may hear. Okay, so they're playing their part in gathering the elect. Okay, so yeah, that's pretty much it. Just a side lesson I want to go into dealing with Manasseh, because they weren't really mentioned in Genesis the 49th chapter. So I want to go back and get a side lesson in there, so you can get the full meal of all the tribes, and Lord willing, it was all edifying to you. So But I'm gonna leave it at that. So I'm gonna say shalom.